The Marlowe mansion had 23 rooms, 5 nurses on rotation, and 1 baby no one could comfort. From the outside, the house looked untouchable. It stood behind black iron gates on a quiet hill in Westchester, all glass walls, pale stone, trimmed hedges, and warm lights glowing as if pain had never entered. The nursery had imported curtains, a hand-carved crib, 3 monitors, 2 cameras, a sound machine, and a rocking chair no one used for more than a minute before giving up. Ethan Marlowe could buy a company before breakfast. He could silence investors with one raised hand and take control of a boardroom without lifting his voice. People called him brilliant, disciplined, impossible to shake. But for 5 nights, the richest man in the house had stood outside his own son's nursery listening to a newborn cry, and he had no idea what to do with his hands. The baby was named Noah. He was 9 weeks old, small enough to disappear inside a blanket, old enough to know when the arms around him were afraid. Since his mother died, Noah had cried as if some part of him knew a voice was missing. He cried through warm blankets, careful feeding, trained nurses, and the soft instructions of a sleep consultant flown in from Manhattan. He cried while machines blinked green beside his crib and 5 women with impressive resumes tried everything they had been paid to know. Nothing worked. By the 5th night, the mansion no longer felt rich. It felt afraid. Staff moved through the halls like shadows. No one laughed in the kitchen. No one let a door close loudly. The night nurse had red eyes. Vivian Cross, the head nanny, stood in the nursery like a general losing a war, her silver hair pinned too tightly and her lips pressed thin. Downstairs, in the laundry room, Clara Hayes stood over an ironing board with a tiny white onesie beneath the steam. She wore a faded gray uniform and black shoes with one cracked sole. Her face was calm in the way exhausted people learn to look calm when life gives them no other choice. She was not one of the nurses. She was not family. Clara came 4 days a week to wash linens, polish bathrooms, fold tiny clothes, and disappear before dinner guests arrived. That was how Vivian liked it. The nursery is not your concern, Vivian had told her on Clara's 2nd day. You may wash the baby's things, but you are not to hold him. You are not to offer opinions, and you are certainly not to confuse your personal history with your employment here. Clara had not answered. People always found a way to say it without saying it. Your baby died. That makes you unsafe. Your grief is inconvenient. Keep it away from respectable rooms. So Clara kept her head down. She folded Noah's blankets. She washed milk stains from his bibs. And every time the baby cried, something inside her remembered a hospital room 3 years earlier. A pale blue blanket, a tiny chest fighting for breath, and doctors trying to be gentle. Her son's name had been Caleb. For 3 years, Clara had not sung. Not in church, not while cooking. Not even when a song came on the radio and her hands remembered the rhythm before her heart could stop them. She had buried lullabies with her child because some melodies were too small to survive the weight of an empty crib. But Noah's cry kept finding her. At first, it was sharp and angry, the cry of a baby pushed past tiredness. Then, it became frantic. Then, on the 5th night, just after 2 a.m, it changed. Clara heard it through the laundry room ceiling. The sound grew thinner, not quieter, thinner. She froze with the iron still in her hand. Above her, footsteps rushed across the nursery floor. Someone called for Ethan. Vivian snapped an order. The baby cried again, but the cry broke in the middle, weak and breathless. Clara's fingers went cold. She knew that sound. She had once stood beside a hospital bassinet and heard her own child make it. The iron hissed, forgotten. The onesie beneath it began to scorch at the edge. Clara stepped back, then forward, then stopped with both hands pressed to the ironing board. It was not her child. It was not her house. It was not her place. Then Noah cried again, barely a cry at all. Clara ran. She took the back stairs because servants were supposed to use them. At the top, a nurse nearly collided with her. "You can't be here," the nurse said. Clara did not stop. The nursery door was open. Warm light spilled into the hall. Inside, the room looked impossibly beautiful and completely helpless. Noah lay in Vivian's arms, face red, lips trembling, tiny fists curled against his chest. Ethan stood near the crib in a wrinkled white shirt, barefoot, his eyes fixed on his son with the terror of a man who had paid everyone else to know what to do. Vivian turned and saw Clara. "What are you doing here? Get out." Clara's eyes stayed on the baby. His cry changed. "You are not qualified to assess anything." Noah gasped between sobs. Clara moved before permission could be given. She crossed the room. Vivian stepped back, offended, but Clara reached for the child with a steadiness that did not ask for approval. "Do not touch him," Vivian hissed. Ethan looked up. "Clara." But Clara had already taken Noah. The room went still. The baby was against her chest, hot and trembling, his small cheek pressed to the faded gray of her uniform. Clara closed her eyes. The weight of him almost broke her. Her arms remembered what her life had lost. Noah gave one weak, shaking cry. Clara lowered her face to his ear. The first note came out as almost nothing. For several seconds, no one moved. Clara held Noah against her chest, afraid that even breathing too loudly might break whatever fragile peace had entered the room. His little hand still gripped her collar, fingers curled into the cheap fabric of her uniform as if it were the only solid thing in a world that had been too bright, too loud, too full of strangers. Vivian was the first to recover. "Give him to me," she said. Her voice was calm, but not gentle. It was the voice of a woman who had just watched her authority collapse in front of the man who paid her salary. Clara looked down at the sleeping child. He just settled. "He is not yours." The words struck the room harder than a shout. Clara's arms tightened for half a second before she forced herself to loosen them. She knew Vivian had not said it only as a reminder. She had said it as a warning, a boundary, a blade. Ethan stood beside the crib, his face pale in the nursery light. He looked younger without his suit jacket, without the sharp lines of business wrapped around him. Barefoot, unshaven, and exhausted, he no longer looked like the man whose name appeared on magazine covers. He looked like a father who had no map. "Vivian," he said quietly. The head nanny turned to him at once. "Mr. Marlowe, with respect, this is exactly what I warned against. Emotional attachment from staff can create confusion, especially in someone with unresolved grief." Clara lowered her eyes. There it was again, grief, spoken like a stain, like something contagious. Ethan did not answer right away. His gaze remained on Noah, who was still sleeping. "How long?" he asked. Vivian blinked. "Sir? How long has it been since he slept like this?" The nurse near the monitor glanced at the screen. "More than 20 minutes at once? 4 days, sir. Maybe 5. Ethan swallowed. Clara could see his hands trembling. He pressed them into fists at his sides, as if anger were easier to hold than shame. "Clara," he said, and the sound of her name in his voice felt strange. Until that night, he had barely used it. She had been the housekeeper, the woman from the agency, the one who came in the afternoon. A function, not a person. "Yes, Mr. Marlowe. Where did you learn that song?" Her throat closed. She looked at the baby again, because looking at Ethan was too difficult. "I made parts of it up," she said. "When my son was sick. There were nights when nothing else helped." The room became uncomfortable in the way rooms do when poor people accidentally reveal pain rich people cannot tidy away. Vivian folded her arms. "That may be so, but this household cannot operate on private emotion. We have a care plan. We have professionals." "With all due respect," one of the younger nurses whispered. The care plan wasn't working. Vivian shot her a look so cold the woman immediately fell silent. Ethan seemed not to hear them. He took one step closer to Clara. Not too close. Just enough that he could see Noah's face. The baby's lashes rested against his cheeks. His mouth was slightly open. His breathing had deepened into a rhythm the monitors had not been able to create. Ethan reached out, then stopped before touching him. Clara saw it. That tiny hesitation, that fear. He was afraid of his own child, not because he did not love him. Clara knew enough about grief to recognize the opposite. Ethan loved Noah so much that touching him meant touching everything he had lost. "Would you like to hold him?" Clara asked softly. Vivian's head snapped toward her. "That is not your place to suggest." But Ethan did not look at Vivian. His eyes stayed on Noah. "I don't want to wake him," he said. Clara nodded. "Then don't take him yet. Just put your hand on his back. Let him know you're here." It was a simple thing. So simple that no one in the room seemed to know what to do with it. Ethan was a man accustomed to solving problems through complexity. Systems, contracts, negotiations, strategy. But Clara was offering him nothing grand, no theory, no expert term, just a hand on a baby's back. Slowly, Ethan placed his palm between Noah's tiny shoulder blades. The baby stirred. Ethan froze. Clara whispered, "Stay." The word was not command, but it carried weight. Ethan stayed. Noah shifted once, then settled again, breathing against Clara while his father's hand rested carefully on him. Something broke across Ethan's face. He looked away quickly, but not before Clara saw the moisture in his eyes. Vivian cleared her throat. "Mr. Marlowe, I strongly recommend we transfer the child back to the crib now. This situation is already irregular." Ethan removed his hand, but his voice had changed when he spoke. "Everyone out." Vivian stiffened. "Sir?" "Everyone except Clara." The nurse stepped back at once. Another staff member gathered a blanket from the chair. Vivian did not move. "Mr. Marlowe, I must object. I heard you. She is not trained." "No," Ethan said, eyes still on his son. "But he is asleep." The words were quiet, but they ended the argument. Vivian's mouth tightened. For one moment, she looked at Clara with something more dangerous than irritation. Not hatred exactly. Fear. Clara had seen that look before in people who believed their position was safe until someone invisible proved necessary. Then Vivian turned and left the nursery. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Only Ethan, Clara, and the sleeping baby remained. The silence felt too intimate for a house where Clara was paid by the hour. "I'm sorry," she said. Ethan looked at her. "For what?" "For crossing a line." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "I have 5 nurses in this house, and a 6-page sleep protocol." My son cried until he nearly could not breathe. "You crossed a line and he slept." Clara did not answer. Ethan walked to the rocking chair. It was a beautiful piece, polished dark wood with cream cushions, placed beside the crib like a photograph of tenderness. But the cushion was too perfect. No worn shape, no softened arms, no sign of a father sitting there night after night. "My wife bought that chair," he said. "She said every nursery needed one thing that could not be automated. I told her we could get the best crib on the market. Motion sensors, temperature control, white noise, anything she wanted." He touched the back of the chair. She laughed at me, said I was missing the point. Clara saw Olivia then, not as a portrait in the hall or a name spoken carefully by staff, but as a woman who had once imagined late nights in that chair with her baby. A woman who had expected to be there. "I'm sorry," Clara said again, but this time she meant something else. Ethan looked at Noah. "She died 6 days after he was born. There was an infection. Rare. Aggressive. The doctors said they did everything." Clara did not sleep that morning. She stayed in the nursery until the first pale color of dawn touched the curtains. Noah woke twice. Each time, Ethan rose before any nurse could enter. The first time, he only stood beside Clara and watched. The second time, with both hands shaking, he let Clara guide the baby into his arms. Noah fussed, but he did not scream. Ethan looked stunned by that small mercy. When Clara finally left the mansion, the sky over the driveway was gray and wet. The black gates opened without ceremony. No one offered her a car. No one asked how she would get home after missing the last night bus. She walked half a mile to the main road with her coat pulled tight around her uniform and the smell of baby shampoo still on her sleeve. At the bus stop, Clara sat alone beneath a flickering advertisement for luxury watches. Her chest hurt from holding Noah, not because he was heavy, but because he had fit too easily into the place where Caleb used to be. She pressed one hand to her sternum, as if she could keep the past from coming through. 3 years earlier, Clara had been a different woman. She had laughed more. She had kept a plant on her kitchen windowsill. She had saved coupons for diapers and argued with her sister about names. Caleb had arrived 6 weeks early on a night of rain. He was smaller than the dolls Clara had seen in store windows, but he had come out fighting, his mouth opening around a cry so fierce the nurse had smiled. "Strong lungs," the nurse had said. For 17 days, Clara believed that was enough. She learned the language of the neonatal ward: oxygen saturation, feeding tube, incubator, rounds. She learned which doctors looked at her and which spoke over her. She learned to sleep in a plastic chair with her hand inside the incubator, one finger touching Caleb's foot. When he could not settle, Clara sang. She did not know many lullabies, so she made one from fragments, a line her mother had hummed while washing dishes, a phrase from a church hymn, a promise Clara repeated because no doctor could make it for her. "Hush now, little heart, Mama's near," the dark will part. At first, Caleb quieted when he heard it. Later, his body became too tired for even that. The night he died, Clara sang until a nurse touched her shoulder and said her name in a voice full of pity. After the funeral, people told Clara she was young enough to try again. They said God had a plan. They said Caleb was in a better place. Every sentence felt like a door closing in her face, so Clara stopped inviting comfort. She returned casseroles uneaten. She packed the tiny clothes into a box and taped it shut. She went back to work, because rent did not pause for grief. She learned to clean wealthy houses without looking at family photographs. She learned to say yes, ma'am, and no, sir, while women complained about children who tracked mud on marble floors. Work was easier than mourning. Work had instructions. Grief had none. The job at the Marlowe mansion had come through an agency that liked Clara because she was punctual, quiet, and did not steal. The manager had mentioned a widower, a newborn, and a staff already in place. Clara almost refused. The word newborn had made her mouth go dry, but the agency also mentioned the hourly rate, and the small stack of overdue bills on Clara's kitchen table had answered for her. On her first day, Vivian inspected her as if she were a stain. You will use the service entrance. You will not speak to Mr. Marlowe, unless spoken to. The nursery linens are to be washed separately. You will report any damage immediately. Clara nodded. Then Vivian looked down at the file in her hand. The agency told me about your child. Clara felt the floor tilt. Did they? They felt it was relevant. Relevant. That was the word rich households used when they wanted to discuss a servant's pain like a safety risk. It will not affect my work, Clara said. See that it doesn't. Mr. Marlowe has suffered enough. Clara had nearly laughed at the cruelty of it. As if suffering were a property title. As if loss counted only when it happened inside a mansion. Instead, she bowed her head and signed the schedule sheet. For weeks, she performed invisibility. She folded Noah's blankets with steady hands. She cleaned the bathrooms attached to guest suites that no guest had entered since Olivia's funeral. She passed Ethan in hallways and watched him look through her. He was not rude in the loud way some rich men were. He was polite and absent, which in Clara's experience could be worse. Polite people could ignore you and still feel moral. Only once did Clara almost quit. She had been asked to wash a basket of Olivia's maternity clothes that someone had found in a closet. The dresses still carried the faint smell of lavender and expensive soap. At the bottom of the basket lay a pale yellow sweater, stretched at the stomach. Clara folded it and suddenly imagined Olivia wearing it, one hand resting on her unborn child, believing she had years ahead of her. Clara had gone into the pantry and pressed both fists against her mouth until the sob passed. When she came out, Vivian was waiting. If this environment is too difficult for you, Vivian said, I can request someone else. No, Clara replied. When Clara returned to the mansion the next afternoon, the air inside had changed. No one said it directly, but she could feel it in the pause when she entered the kitchen, in the way a nurse looked up and then quickly looked away, in the way the housekeeper stopped labeling jars and pretended to be busy with a spoon. News moved quickly through rich houses, even when everyone claimed discretion. By lunch, every staff member knew that the maid had held the baby. By dinner, the story had grown. Clara had barged into the nursery. Clara had sung some strange song. Clara had made Mr. Marlowe cry. Clara had stayed until dawn like she belonged there. Vivian waited for her beside the laundry room door. She wore a navy dress, pearl earrings, and the expression of someone who had rehearsed authority in the mirror. Mr. Marlowe has requested that you remain on call during your shifts, Vivian said. If the child becomes distressed, you may be asked to assist. However, you will not enter the nursery unless I approve it. You will not hold him unless requested. You will not discuss your personal history with anyone in this house. Do you understand? Clara looked at the basket in her hands. Yes, and you will not mistake temporary usefulness for importance. That made Clara look up. Vivian's eyes were steady. You soothed him once. We are all grateful. But grief can make women imagine bonds that do not exist. Mr. Marlowe is vulnerable. His son is vulnerable. I will not allow this household to become a stage for someone else's unresolved sorrow. Clara felt heat rise behind her eyes, but she kept her voice even. I am here to work. Good. Then work. The door closed between them. For the rest of the day, Clara did what she had always done. She separated whites from colors. She scrubbed milk from muslin cloths. She polished the bathroom mirror until no trace of her face remained in it, but the mansion kept pulling her attention upward. Every cry from the nursery caught her body before her mind. Every hurried footstep made her pause. At 3 in the afternoon, a new specialist arrived with a leather briefcase and a voice that sounded expensive. He spoke to Vivian in the hall about infant sleep regression, overstimulation, scent associations, grief in the household environment. Clara heard phrases float down the stairs while she folded towels: controlled soothing, reduced intervention, minimize attachment confusion. Those words made Clara's hands slow. Attachment confusion. As if a baby in pain were a legal contract with unclear ownership. Later, she passed the nursery while carrying linens and saw Noah in his crib beneath a mobile of silver clouds. Vivian stood beside him, one hand on the rail, her voice low but firm. "Settle yourself," Vivian murmured. "You must learn." Noah's face was turned toward the window. He whimpered without opening his eyes. Clara noticed the curtains were wide open. Afternoon sun struck the side of the crib. She noticed the sound machine was playing Ocean Waves too loudly. She noticed 3 different women had worn 3 different perfumes into the room. She noticed a blanket that smelled of laundry soap placed where his mother's sweater had been the day before. Noah was not learning to settle. He was learning that the world kept changing. Clara said nothing. She had no right. Not yet. That evening, Ethan came home before sunset, earlier than the staff expected. He stepped out of the black car with his tie loose and a phone pressed to his ear. 2 assistants followed him, speaking about a board vote and a delayed acquisition. Ethan ended the call in the foyer and stood very still when he heard Noah crying upstairs. Vivian descended a moment later. "He is tired, Mr. Marlowe. We are implementing a stricter routine tonight." Ethan looked past her toward the stairs. "Did he sleep this afternoon?" "Briefly." "How briefly?" Vivian's pause lasted too long. 16 minutes. Ethan's jaw moved. He saw Clara near the laundry cart, and his eyes flickered toward her. Vivian saw that glance. Clara saw Vivian seeing it. "Clara," Ethan said. She straightened. "Sir?" "Stay near the nursery floor tonight. If Vivian needs you." Vivian's smile did not move. "Of course, if I need her." Clara nodded and lowered her eyes, but something had shifted. Ethan had not given her authority, not exactly, yet he had pulled her from invisibility. In a house built on rank, that was enough to make enemies. The stricter routine failed before midnight. Noah cried for 40 minutes, slept for 7, woke as soon as the nurse changed arms, and then cried until his skin turned blotchy. Vivian insisted on procedure. The specialist watched from a chair and made notes on a tablet. Ethan stood in the hallway, not entering, not leaving. Clara sat on a bench near the linen closet with folded blankets in her lap. She was close enough to hear, far enough to remain obedient. At one point, Ethan came out of the nursery and leaned against the wall across from her. "What would you do?" he asked. The question was so quiet Clara almost thought she had imagined it. Vivian, inside the room, was telling the nurse to avoid excessive rocking. Clara looked at the closed door. "Lower the lights. Turn off the ocean sound. Use the same blanket twice in a row. Let one person hold him long enough for him to know where he is." The next week became a contest no one named. Vivian called it a transitional adjustment. The specialist called it the formation of a soothing hierarchy. The nurses called it exhausting. Clara called it surviving the truth one night at a time. Noah did not become an easy baby. Stories like that were for people who wanted miracles without labor. He still cried at dusk. He still startled when too many footsteps entered the room. He still searched the air with his mouth and fists, as if grief had left a shape there. But something had changed. When Clara's voice reached him, even from across the hall, he listened. The first time it happened in daylight, Ethan was standing in the nursery with a tablet in one hand and failure in his eyes. Noah had been crying through a feeding. Vivian insisted the bottle temperature was perfect. The nurse said he might have gas. Clara passed the open door with clean blankets and hummed without thinking. One note, barely that. Noah stopped crying. Everyone turned. Clara froze. "I'm sorry." Ethan looked from her to the baby. "Do it again." Vivian cut in. "Mr. Marlowe, we should avoid reinforcing random associations." "Do it again," Ethan repeated, not loudly, but with the tone he used in boardrooms when decisions were finished. Clara stepped just inside the doorway. She did not reach for Noah. She kept both hands on the basket and hummed the line again. Noah's eyes, wet and unfocused, shifted toward her. His lower lip trembled. but the scream did not return. Ethan looked as if someone had placed a key in his hand and told him it opened a door he had been pushing against for weeks. "Why that song?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "I don't know." That was almost true. She knew why it mattered to her. She did not know why it mattered to Noah. From then on, Ethan began noticing things. He noticed Clara never entered unless asked. He noticed she washed her hands before touching anything in the nursery, even if she had only touched clean laundry. He noticed she spoke to Noah before lifting him, always giving the baby a second to hear her voice. He noticed she did not perform affection when others watched. She never kissed the baby in secret, never called herself anything she was not, never used Noah's need as a way to ask for favor. This confused Ethan more than ambition would have. Ambition, he understood. People wanted money, status, access, influence. Clara seemed to want none of those things. She accepted overtime pay only when the agency required it. She ate in the service kitchen. She thanked the nurses who helped her and ignored the ones who whispered. One afternoon, Ethan found her sitting on the nursery floor with Noah awake on a blanket before her. She was not holding him. She had placed 3 soft cloths in front of him, each with a different texture, and was letting his tiny hand brush them. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked. Clara started to rise. "I can leave." "No. I mean, what is that?" He startles when everything changes too fast. This lets him meet one thing at a time. Ethan looked at Noah. The baby moved his fingers over a square of worn cotton from one of Olivia's old scarves. His breathing remained calm. "Who taught you that?" Ethan asked. Clara folded her hands in her lap. "Hospitals teach you what babies can tolerate. Grief teaches you what adults forget." Ethan sat on the edge of the rocking chair. It was the first time Clara had seen him use it without being prompted. "And what do adults forget?" "That babies are small people," Clara said. "Not problems." The words landed quietly. Ethan looked at his son for a long time. In the hallway, Vivian watched through the partly open door. She saw Ethan sitting while Clara taught him with no certificate, no uniform of authority, no permission from the hierarchy Vivian had built around the nursery. She saw Noah calm. She saw Ethan listening. Every moment was a thread pulled from the fabric of her control. That evening, Vivian began changing the schedule. She moved Clara's laundry hours away from Noah's worst periods. She assigned Clara to guest bathrooms on the far side of the mansion. She instructed nurses not to call Clara unless she approved. When Ethan asked why Clara had not been present during a difficult spell, Vivian said, "I assumed you wanted your son to bond with qualified caregivers." Ethan did not answer, but the next day he placed a small note on the nursery supply clipboard. "If Noah escalates past 10 minutes, call Clara." Vivian removed it within an hour. Clara found the torn note in the trash while emptying bins. She recognized Ethan's handwriting from labels on a box in his office. She smoothed the paper on her palm and felt a sadness she did not want. He was trying, but he still did not understand the house he lived in. In a mansion, orders moved downward. Fears moved sideways. Resentment hid in polished corners. That night, Ethan stayed home. He dismissed 2 assistants and took his calls from the hallway outside the nursery. Clara heard him say, "Move the meeting." "No." "I said move it." A pause. "My son is ill. That is the reason." It was the first time she heard him place Noah above business. At 11, Noah woke, crying. Vivian arrived first, then the nurse, then Ethan. Clara remained near the linen closet because no one had called her. The cry built. Ethan looked into the hallway. Vivian blocked the doorway with her body. "Give him time," she said. "He's had time," Ethan replied. "You cannot run to that woman every time he cries." The words came out sharper than intended. Everyone heard them. Vivian had spent 30 years in houses where money tried to protect itself from embarrassment. She knew how wealthy families worked. They hired love in polished forms, gave it titles, insured it, supervised it, and dismissed it before it asked to be seen. A nanny could be trusted as long as she remained both indispensable and replaceable. Vivian had mastered that balance. Clara threatened it without trying. That was what Vivian hated most. If Clara had flirted with Ethan, Vivian could have named it. If Clara had asked for money, Vivian could have reported it. If Clara had made mistakes, Vivian could have documented them. But Clara did none of those things. She simply listened to the baby and told the truth in plain sentences. In a mansion filled with specialists, plain truth sounded dangerous. So Vivian chose another weapon: concern. She began with the nurses. During break times, she stood in the service kitchen and lowered her voice just enough to invite attention. "I worry for her," she said, stirring tea she never drank. "Losing a child can fracture a woman's boundaries. She may not even realize what she is doing." The younger nurse who had once defended Clara looked uncomfortable. "She seems careful." Careful people can still become attached. Mr. Marlowe is vulnerable. Imagine the scandal if a staff member convinced herself she had a maternal claim. That word, claim, traveled faster than any fact. By the next morning, the chef had heard that Clara called Noah hers. By afternoon, the driver heard she wanted to move into the house. By evening, a gardener told another housekeeper that Clara had been dismissed from a previous job for getting too involved with a child. None of it was true. It did not need to be. Gossip in service corridors did not require evidence. It required hierarchy. Clara felt the change at once. Conversations stopped when she entered. A cup she had used was set aside as if grief could be washed separately. When she asked a nurse whether Noah had fed well, the woman answered, "Vivian said all updates should go through her." Clara nodded. She had learned long ago that defending yourself against rumors often fed them. Still, each small rejection pressed on old bruises. After Caleb died, neighbors had crossed grocery aisles to avoid her because they did not know what to say. Now strangers avoided her because they thought she might take what was not hers. Ethan noticed only pieces. He noticed Clara spoke less. He noticed Vivian inserted herself whenever Clara entered the room. He noticed Noah grew tense when too many adults hovered. But Ethan was still learning the language of the house. He understood hostile negotiations. He did not yet understand hostile kindness. One morning, Vivian entered his office carrying a folder. Ethan's office overlooked the garden where Olivia had once planned to plant lavender. The plants were still in nursery pots beside the greenhouse, forgotten after her funeral. "I need to discuss Clara Hayes," Vivian said. Ethan closed his laptop. "What about her? She is becoming central to Noah's regulation. That may seem helpful now, but it is clinically unwise. If he associates comfort with one unstable caregiver, removal later will be traumatic. Unstable? Emotionally compromised," Vivian corrected. "Her loss is documented." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Documented by whom?" "The agency disclosed it. I assume for liability reasons." He leaned back. "Are you saying I should dismiss the only person who has helped my son sleep because she lost a child? I am saying compassion must not blind us to risk." Ethan looked toward the garden. "Compassion has not been our biggest problem in this house." Vivian's expression tightened. "Mr. Marlowe, grief can make people manipulative without intending harm. You are grieving. She is grieving. The baby is an emotional bridge between you. That is not healthy." The sentence sounded reasonable. That was its danger. Ethan said nothing for a long moment. He thought of Clara's hand guiding his to Noah's back. He thought of her refusing extra money the night she stayed late until the agency insisted on recording the hours. He thought of the way she always stepped away when he entered, as if afraid someone would accuse her of standing too close to his life. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Vivian sensed an opening. "A gradual separation. We should reduce her involvement. Maintain professional care. If needed, we can bring in a pediatric behavioral consultant. There are excellent people in London." Ethan almost laughed. Another consultant. Another plane ticket. Another expert to explain his son to him, while Clara, who had already understood, folded sheets downstairs. "No," he said. Vivian's chin lifted. "Sir? We are not removing her." "Then, at least establish boundaries. Boundaries are fine. Punishment is not." Vivian left with her folder held against her chest like a shield. That night, Clara found a new printed policy taped inside the nursery cabinet. All staff were required to log every physical interaction with the infant, including duration, purpose, and supervisor present. The sheet included columns for witness signatures. The donor dinner became the first public crack in the Marlowe household. Downstairs, men and women in tailored clothes raised money for maternal health, while the motherless baby cried above them. Ethan had chosen the cause because Olivia had cared about it. He had not realized how cruel the symbolism would feel until he stood at the bottom of the stairs, hearing his son wail during speeches about family support. Clara reached the nursery and found Noah stiff with exhaustion. Vivian stood beside the crib, refusing to lift him because the specialist had advised against immediate intervention. The baby had cried so hard that sweat dampened his hair. "Enough," Clara said. Vivian turned slowly. "Excuse me?" Clara heard her own voice and was surprised by its steadiness. "He is past learning anything. He needs help. You will not speak to me that way. Then don't make me." For one breath, the two women stared at each other. Clara expected Vivian to call security, to call Ethan, to destroy her. Instead, Vivian stepped aside with a smile that felt like a locked door opening to a pit. "Go on, then," Vivian said. "Show everyone you know better." Clara should have recognized the invitation as danger, but Noah's cry snapped again, and she no longer cared what trap lay beneath the floor. She lifted him, held him close, and hummed the lullaby. The baby settled, not immediately, but enough. His breathing slowed. His head turned toward her voice. At the doorway, Ethan appeared. He had left his guests without apology. Behind him, several donors stood at a respectful distance, pretending not to stare. Vivian saw them and let the scene arrange itself. The maid holding the baby, the father watching, the household hierarchy broken in front of witnesses. Clara felt exposed. She tried to hand Noah to Ethan. "He wants you." Vivian gave a soft laugh. "Does he?" Ethan ignored her and took his son. Noah whimpered but did not scream. Clara began humming again, and Ethan matched the rhythm with his uneven breath. Together, awkwardly, they kept the baby calm. One of the guests, an older woman with kind eyes, whispered, "Olivia used to hum something like that." Clara's voice stopped. Ethan looked at the woman. "What did you say?" The guest flushed. "I'm sorry. I may be mistaken." At the baby shower, she played us a little recording she had made for the nursery. There was a tune. Similar, perhaps. Ethan's face went blank. "I don't remember that." "You were taking a call," the woman said gently. "A call." Clara saw the words cut him. She saw the familiar pain of realizing the dead had left moments behind and the living had missed them. The dinner ended early. Ethan did not return to the table. Vivian escorted the guests out with apologies polished smooth. Clara stayed in the nursery until Noah slept, then slipped away to finish washing coffee cups that had gone cold. Near midnight, while carrying folded blankets to a storage room, Clara passed Olivia's old sitting room. The door was usually locked. That night, it stood open. Boxes filled the floor, labeled by an assistant months ago and never sorted. Maternity clothes, sympathy cards, nursery plans, personal audio. Clara should have kept walking. Every rule in the mansion told her to keep walking. But on a small side table sat a white recorder, the kind used for voice notes. A label on it read, "For Noah." Clara stood at the threshold. She did not touch it. She only looked. From behind her, Ethan said, "I found it after the dinner." She turned quickly. "I'm sorry." The door was open. "It is all right." He stepped into the room with the recorder in his hand. "I have been avoiding these boxes." Olivia's sister packed them. "I told myself I was waiting until I could do it properly." "Really?" "I was waiting until I could do it without feeling anything." Clara said nothing. The room smelled faintly of lavender. On the wall hung a photograph of Olivia barefoot in the garden, laughing at something outside the frame. Ethan pressed play. Olivia's voice filled the room, soft and close, a little embarrassed. "Noah, if your father forgets where I put this, remind him that I told him twice. This is not a professional recording. This is your mother in the 3rd trimester, swollen ankles, terrible heartburn, and a voice that cannot stay on key. But I wanted you to have something that was mine. Something not purchased by your father after reading reviews." Ethan closed his eyes. Olivia laughed on the recording, then hummed. The melody was broken, uncertain, incomplete. But Clara knew the bones of it. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Hush now, little heart." Not the exact words, not the full song. But the shape was there, unmistakable. Ethan paused the recorder. "You know it." Clara could barely speak. "I don't understand. Could she have heard it somewhere?" "I made it for Caleb. Parts of it were old, but not like that. I never wrote it down. I never sang it outside the hospital." Ethan looked at the recorder as if it had become alive in his palm. Then how did Olivia know it? The question moved through the room like a draft from a door opened long ago. Clara tried to remember the hospital during Caleb's final days. She remembered fluorescent light, machines, a vending machine that ate quarters, parents moving like ghosts through corridors, a pregnant woman sitting alone outside the chapel one night, crying silently into both hands. Clara had been too destroyed to ask her name. Secrets change rooms, even when no one speaks them aloud. After the night of the recording, Ethan moved through the mansion with a different weight. He began spending time in Olivia's sitting room, listening to every file on the recorder. Sometimes Clara heard Olivia's laugh float faintly down the corridor. Sometimes she heard Ethan stop a recording halfway through and remain silent for an hour. Noah slept better when Ethan played the broken melody. Not always, not magically, but enough to prove the connection mattered. Clara suggested placing the recorder near the rocking chair, not in the crib, so Ethan would have to be present when it played. He understood. Vivian did too. "You are making yourself essential to things that belong to this family," Vivian told Clara in the pantry one afternoon. Clara was rinsing bottles. "The recording belongs to Noah. And you believe you do too?" Clara set the bottle down. "No." "Then behave accordingly." The trap began with cameras. The Marlowe mansion already had security throughout the main halls, nursery entrance, and staff corridors. Vivian requested access under the excuse of reviewing night procedures. Ethan approved it without thinking. He was distracted by a legal crisis at work and a pediatric appointment. Vivian downloaded clips, watched them alone, and began cutting truth into lies. A video of Clara entering the nursery became evidence that she ignored boundaries. The missing minutes before it, where Vivian had refused to lift a choking, sobbing child, were trimmed away. A clip of Clara holding Noah while Ethan washed his hands became Clara refusing to return the baby. The next portion, where she placed Noah carefully in Ethan's arms, disappeared. A hallway shot of Clara outside Olivia's sitting room became Clara sneaking into private spaces. It did not show Ethan behind her with the recorder. Vivian saved each file with clinical names: Incident 1, Incident 2, Unauthorized Contact, Boundary Breach. Then she waited. She did not have to wait long. Ethan's mother-in-law, Margaret Bell, arrived from Boston on a Thursday, wearing black wool and disapproval. Margaret had never liked the mansion after Olivia died. She said it was too modern, too glassy, too full of devices. But she liked Ethan's grief even less. She believed he had loved her daughter badly, with too many absences and too many calls taken at the wrong moments. Margaret entered the nursery and found Clara singing while Ethan held Noah. The scene, to anyone else, might have looked tender. To a grieving mother who had lost her daughter, it looked like replacement. "Who is this?" Margaret asked. Ethan stood. "This is Clara. She helps with Noah." "Helps how?" Clara stepped back. "I can leave you with your grandson." Margaret's eyes moved over the gray uniform, the worn shoes, the tired face. "I asked my son-in-law." Ethan's voice tightened. "She has been good to him. Good is not the same as appropriate." Vivian, standing behind Margaret, lowered her eyes with perfect sadness. By evening, Vivian had shown Margaret the edited clips. She did it in the breakfast room, where Olivia's portrait hung above fresh flowers. Vivian did not accuse Clara outright. She let the videos speak in pieces. "I hesitate to bring this to you," Vivian said, "but you loved Olivia. You understand the importance of preserving her place." Margaret watched Clara lift Noah on screen, watched Ethan standing nearby, unsure, watched Clara at the sitting room door, her face hardened with each clip. "Why was I not told?" Margaret asked. "Mr. Marlowe is under enormous strain. He wants relief. Sometimes relief can cloud judgment." Margaret's voice became ice. "A maid is not going to step into my daughter's nursery and play mother to her child." That was the sentence Vivian wanted. The next day, Margaret confronted Ethan. Clara was in the hallway with linens when the argument began in Olivia's sitting room. "You are lonely," Margaret said. "You are exhausted." "I understand that. But you cannot let some woman with a sad story attach herself to your son." Ethan's voice was lower. "That is not what is happening." "Then what is happening?" "Because I saw the videos." A pause. Clara's stomach turned. "What videos?" Ethan asked. Vivian's voice entered, smooth and reluctant. "I compiled procedural concerns. For Noah's safety." Clara stood in the hallway with the linens pressed to her chest. She wanted to run, but her feet would not move. "She entered private rooms," Margaret said. "She handled Olivia's belongings. She holds Noah like she has a right. I was with her when she found the recorder," Ethan said. "But she did find it. Conveniently." The implication came like smoke under a door. Ethan emerged minutes later and found Clara in the hallway. His expression was unreadable, which frightened her more than anger would have. Did Vivian record you? He asked. I don't know. Did you ever enter Olivia's room without permission? Clara felt the trap closing. The truthful answer was complicated, and complicated answers often sounded guilty. The door was open. I stopped at the threshold. Then you came. Did you touch anything? No. He searched her face. Clara saw that he wanted to believe her. She also saw that wanting was not the same as knowing. Before he could speak, Noah cried from the nursery. All three adults turned toward the sound. Vivian came down the hall with Margaret behind her. Do not call her, Margaret said. Ethan looked at his mother-in-law. My son is crying. Then you hold him. You are his father. Or have you forgotten that because this woman made herself convenient? The final proof waited in a cardboard box that no one wanted to open. It sat beneath Olivia's writing desk, taped carefully, labeled by her sister in blue marker. Journals. Private. Ethan had avoided that box longer than any other. Recordings were painful, but voices had edges. Diaries were different. Diaries contained thoughts the dead had not chosen to speak aloud. Reading them felt like trespassing and longing at the same time. After the laundry room clip appeared, he could avoid it no longer. Vivian presented the footage during breakfast, with Margaret present and Clara absent. I apologize, she said, placing her tablet on the table. But after last night, I believe we have crossed from concern into danger. Ethan watched himself enter the laundry room with Noah. He watched Clara lean near. The angle made the moment look intimate, secretive. It did not show her hands empty at her sides. It did not show him asking for instruction. It did not show the hour of struggle. It showed only enough to feed suspicion. Margaret looked sick. In the laundry room? With my grandson? I asked her for help, Ethan said. Vivian's voice softened. You asked because she has made herself necessary. The accusation landed harder because part of Ethan feared it. He feared dependency. He feared weakness. He feared that everyone could see he had failed so badly as a father that a maid had to teach him how to hold his child. Margaret pushed back her chair. Olivia would be devastated. That sentence broke something in him. Do not use her like that, Ethan said. Margaret stared. Vivian went still. Ethan stood. None of us knows what Olivia would say because none of us has had the courage to listen to what she left, including me. He went to Olivia's sitting room and locked the door behind him. The first diary began 2 years before Noah's birth. It was full of ordinary things that hurt because they were ordinary. Garden plans, dinner complaints, notes about Ethan forgetting lunch, jokes about baby names long before she was pregnant. The second diary covered her pregnancy. Ethan read slowly, stopping often when regret made the words blur. Olivia had been lonelier than he knew. Not unloved, but alone in the spaces his ambition did not enter. She wrote about appointments he missed, not with bitterness at first, but with excuses on his behalf. E has a launch this week. E says next time. E looked so tired I pretended not to mind. Then came the hospital entry. Street. Agnes. Chapel hallway. I heard a woman sing tonight. I do not know her name. She was holding a blue blanket against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her alive. I think her baby was in the NICU. I was there for Mara, but after visiting hours I could not leave. I sat outside the chapel and cried because I am terrified of becoming a mother, terrified of failing, terrified that E will love the idea of a child more than the actual need of one. Ethan stopped reading. The room tilted. He forced himself on. The woman sang to the blanket, not loudly. Maybe she did not know I could hear. The song was broken and simple. Hush now, little heart. Mama's near. The dark will part. I have never heard anything more honest. It was not performance. It was not comfort the way people package comfort. It was love with no guarantee. I wanted to ask her name, but she looked so shattered that speaking felt like stealing from her. I pray her child lives. I pray mine will know that kind of presence. If I forget everything else, let me remember this. Babies do not need perfect mothers. They need someone willing to stay in the dark with them. Ethan pressed the diary to his mouth and wept. There was more. Weeks later, Olivia had tried to recreate the tune. She wrote the line again, changing it, adding her own words. For Noah, someday, if I am scared, sing anyway. If E is scared, make him stay. He runs from helplessness because he thinks love should be competence. Teach him that love is presence. Ethan read that sentence again and again. If E is scared, make him stay. Olivia had known him. She had seen the exact failure he was living now. She had not condemned him. She had left him instruction through a song she borrowed from a grieving stranger. He opened the third diary, the one from the week before Noah's birth. Olivia wrote of swollen feet, heartburn, impatience, joy. She wrote that she had put a recorder in the nursery box. She wrote that Ethan would probably buy 6 smarter devices and misplace the simplest one. Then, the last completed entry. If anything ever happens to me, I hope Noah is surrounded by people who love him more than they love being important. I hope Ethan lets help come from unexpected places. He respects expertise, but I hope he learns to respect tenderness too. The woman at street. Agnes will never know this, but her song made me braver. Maybe one day I will sing it well. Maybe one day Noah will hear it and feel that I am near. Ethan sat in the room until afternoon. Light shifted across the floor. Outside, the mansion continued without him. Vivian arranged schedules. Margaret called lawyers. Clara scrubbed a bathroom sink with both hands shaking because she knew something terrible was gathering and had no power to stop it. When Ethan finally opened the door, Clara was in the hallway with a bucket. Vivian chose Sunday because Sundays looked innocent. The mansion ran slower. Fewer outside staff came through. Margaret was still staying in the guest wing. Ethan had agreed to hold a small remembrance lunch for Olivia's parents and 2 close friends, partly because Margaret insisted, partly because he felt guilty for hiding from everyone who had loved his wife. Clara was not scheduled to serve. She had asked to remain in the laundry room and finish linens. Vivian agreed too easily. By noon, the dining room was set with white flowers and Olivia's favorite blue plates. Her photograph stood near the window, not the formal portrait from the hall, but a candid picture of her laughing with wind in her hair. Ethan carried Noah downstairs for 10 minutes before the meal. The baby was calm against his shoulder. That alone should have been enough blessing for the day. Margaret watched them with a grief that had begun to soften. She had read the diary entry herself. She had not apologized to Clara, but she no longer spoke of her as a danger. That frightened Vivian. She was losing the grandmother too, so during lunch, Vivian excused herself and returned with a small silver bracelet in her palm. Olivia's bracelet, the one she had worn in the hospital. The one Margaret had placed in the memory box beside the diaries. "Mr. Marlowe," Vivian said, her voice trembling just enough. "I found this in the laundry room." Conversation stopped. Ethan looked at the bracelet. "What?" "In Clara's supply cabinet, wrapped in a cloth." Clara, who had just entered with a basket of folded napkins, went cold from head to foot. Margaret stood. That was in Olivia's box. Vivian turned toward Clara with sorrowful precision. "I did not want to believe it. But after the boundary concerns, the private room, the videos, and now this." "No," Clara said. The word was small, swallowed by the dining room. Ethan's face had gone unreadable again. Clara hated that expression now. It meant he was trying to think while everyone else bled. "Clara," he said carefully, "did you take that bracelet?" "No." Vivian placed a hand to her chest. "I found it myself. Then someone put it there." Margaret's eyes flashed. "Are you accusing the household to defend yourself?" Clara looked at the faces around the table. Wealthy friends, grieving parents, staff frozen near the walls, Ethan holding Noah, Vivian standing beneath Olivia's photograph with the bracelet in her hand. The trap was perfect because it used reverence as a weapon. To defend herself, Clara would have to turn a remembrance lunch into a trial. Noah began to fuss. Vivian's eyes flicked toward him. "You see? Even now, she agitates the child." That was when Clara understood. Vivian did not only want her dismissed, she wanted every moment of tenderness between Clara and Noah reclassified as contamination. She wanted Clara erased from the story before Olivia's diary could make her part of it. Ethan handed Noah to a nurse and stepped forward. Everyone leave the room except family and staff involved. No one moved at first. Then chairs scraped. Guests filed out in embarrassed silence. The dining room doors closed. Ethan turned to Vivian. Where exactly was it? In the lower supply cabinet. Who has access? Housekeeping staff. Laundry staff. Clara most of all. And you? Vivian's mouth tightened. Of course, as head of nursery care, I have access to household areas. Clara felt a flash of hope. Ethan was asking the right questions, but Margaret spoke before hope could grow. Why would Vivian steal Olivia's bracelet only to reveal it? Vivian lowered her eyes. I wish I knew why anyone would do such a thing. Noah cried louder from the adjoining sitting room. The nurse bounced him nervously. Ethan flinched toward the sound. Clara's body did too. Vivian saw it. "Do not go to him," Vivian said. Clara froze. "If you care about him at all," Vivian continued, "stop confusing him. Stop making yourself the answer." Clara looked at Ethan. "I didn't take it." He looked back at her, and for one painful second, she saw belief and doubt fighting in him. Doubt did not need to win completely. It only needed to appear. That was enough. Clara straightened. "Mr. Marlowe, I think I should leave." Ethan's head lifted. "No. Yes." Her voice shook, but she kept it steady enough to remain standing. "Not because I took anything. I didn't. But because every time your son needs comfort, someone turns it into a charge against me. I cannot help him while defending myself from people who need me to be guilty." Noah's cry sharpened. Margaret looked uncertain now. Vivian did not. Ethan stepped closer. "Clara, wait." She looked at the baby through the open sitting room door. The nurse held him awkwardly. His face was red, his fists tight. Every instinct in Clara screamed to go to him. Instead, she dug her nails into her palms. This was the choice Vivian had made for her: protect herself or comfort a child, while everyone watched and called it proof. The first night without Clara was worse than the first night after Olivia died, because now Ethan knew the difference between helplessness and cowardice. Before Clara, he had believed the problem was beyond him. After Clara, he understood that part of the problem had been his absence. Noah cried until his voice cracked. Vivian insisted on distance. Margaret begged Ethan to do something, then did not know what something meant. The nurses rotated through techniques that sounded professional and felt empty. Ethan held his son for 40 minutes while Noah arched and screamed. Not because Ethan was doing everything wrong, but because he was terrified of being left again with only strangers who smelled different every hour. At 2 a.m, Ethan dismissed everyone. Vivian refused. "Mr. Marlowe, you are exhausted. Get out." His voice was so quiet that she obeyed. Ethan remained in the nursery with Noah against his shoulder. The baby screamed beside his ear. Ethan wanted to hand him to someone, anyone, and step back into the clean numbness that had carried him through funerals, board meetings, condolences, and sleepless nights. Instead, he remembered Olivia's diary. "If E is scared, make him stay." So he stayed. He walked. He hummed the wrong tune. He whispered the truth again and again. "I'm here. I am sorry. I am not leaving. I don't know how to do this, but I am here." Noah did not calm quickly. Nothing beautiful happened for a long time. Ethan's shirt grew damp with sweat and tears. His arms ached. His back burned. He cried twice, silently, because he finally understood that fatherhood was not a feeling that arrived fully formed. It was a decision repeated while someone small depended on it. Near dawn, Noah slept for 12 minutes against Ethan's chest. 12 minutes. Ethan lowered himself into Olivia's rocking chair and wept openly. In the morning, he did what he should have done before accusing Clara, even by implication. He requested the full security footage. Not clips. Not Vivian's folder. Every camera angle from the previous week. The security manager hesitated. "Mrs. Cross has been handling nursery review." Not anymore. For 6 hours, Ethan watched the house tell the truth. He saw Vivian block Clara from the nursery while Noah cried. He saw Clara stand in hallways with empty hands. He saw himself enter the laundry room and Clara keep distance, instructing him without touching the baby. He saw Vivian enter the supply room 20 minutes before the bracelet appeared. He saw her leave with one hand inside her pocket. By the time Margaret entered the office, Ethan had paused the footage on that frame. She stared at the screen. Age seemed to reach her all at once. "Vivian?" "Yes." Margaret sat down slowly. "I defended her. We both did, in different ways." Margaret's eyes filled. "I thought I was defending Olivia." Ethan looked at the paused image. So did she, maybe. Or she was defending her power. Sometimes people confuse the two. They found the original bracelet in Vivian's private drawer, wrapped in tissue. The one shown at lunch had been taken from Olivia's box and planted. The supply cabinet footage proved it. The edited clips proved the rest. Vivian did not deny it when confronted. She only lifted her chin and said, "I protected this family from a dangerous attachment." Ethan stood across from her in the foyer, Noah asleep upstairs after a brutal morning. Margaret stood beside him. Staff lined the hall, silent witnesses to the collapse of a woman they had feared too much to question. "You planted my wife's bracelet," Ethan said. I preserved your wife's place. You used her memory to punish the woman who helped our son. Vivian's eyes flashed. That woman made you weak. Ethan almost smiled. It was not happiness. It was recognition. No. She made me stay. Vivian had no answer for that. He dismissed her immediately. No recommendation letter. No quiet resignation. Her agency would receive the footage. She left through the front door because Ethan would not let her use the service exit. Clara had been forced out that way. Vivian would not. When the door closed, the mansion did not feel victorious. It felt ashamed. Ethan went to Clara's apartment that afternoon. He did not send a driver. He drove himself, getting lost twice because his phone signal failed between narrow streets and older buildings. Clara lived on the third floor of a brick walk up above a small grocery that sold plantains, rice, batteries, and cheap umbrellas. Ethan stood outside her door for nearly a minute before knocking. Clara opened it, wearing a faded sweater and no expression at all. Mr. Marlowe. The formality hurt. He deserved it. Vivian planted the bracelet, he said. We have the footage. She is gone. Clara closed her eyes, not with relief, but with exhaustion. I am glad you know. I am sorry. She nodded once. Thank you. He waited, but she did not invite him in. Noah needs you, he said. Something in her face hardened. That cannot be the reason. Ethan stopped. Clara opened the door wider, not as welcome, but as decision. Come in for 5 minutes. Not because you are rich and not because your son cries, because if we are going to speak, you should see where I live after leaving your house. He stepped into the small apartment. It was clean, spare, and warm from a kettle on the stove. A folded blanket lay on the sofa. Bills were stacked beneath a paperweight shaped like a bird. On a small shelf stood one photograph of Clara holding a baby in a hospital blanket. Caleb. Ethan looked away quickly, ashamed of intruding even with permission. You came to ask me to return, Clara said. But I need you to understand something. I cannot be your son's substitute mother. I cannot be Olivia's ghost. I cannot be the woman who solves your grief so you don't have to live inside it. I know. Do you? Because needing me is not the same as respecting me. He took that without defense. You are right. She studied him, surprised by the absence of argument. Ethan continued. I watched the footage. I watched you stand 3 feet away while I learned to hold him. I watched you refuse to make yourself the center. I watched myself fail to protect you because I still wanted someone else to be responsible for the painful parts. I am asking you to come back, not to replace Olivia, and not to rescue me. I am asking you to help me learn until Noah knows that his father can be safe too. Clara's eyes moved to Caleb's photograph. And if I say no? His throat tightened. Then I will still do the work. I will still tell Noah about you. I will still make sure Vivian never hurts another family, and I will still be sorry. That answer mattered. Clara wished it did not. From his coat pocket, Ethan took a folded copy of Olivia's diary page. Margaret wanted you to have this. A copy, not the original. She said she owes you more than an apology, but she is not brave enough yet. Clara accepted it with trembling fingers. She read the line again. The woman at Street Agnes will never know this, but her song made me braver. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she whispered, Caleb left something behind. Ethan's eyes filled. Yes, that was the moment Clara's anger bent under grief. When Clara returned to the Marlowe mansion, she entered through the front door. Ethan insisted. Clara almost refused, not because she cared about grand entrances, but because the front door felt like theater. Ethan said it was not theater, it was correction. The staff gathered in accidental clusters, pretending not to watch. Margaret stood near the staircase, pale and stiff. Noah's cry drifted down from the nursery, tired and raw. Clara stopped in the foyer. The sound pulled at her with both hands. Every old instinct said run to him. Instead, she looked at Ethan. You first, she said. He nodded. No argument. No panic disguised as command. He climbed the stairs with Clara behind him and Margaret following at a distance. In the nursery, a nurse held Noah with the helpless look of someone who had tried everything she knew. Ethan washed his hands, dried them slowly, and reached for his son. The nurse gave him over. Noah screamed harder at the change, his little body bowing away from uncertainty. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second. Clara saw the old fear rise, the fear of failing, the fear of Olivia's absence. The fear that Noah's pain was proof that Ethan had already lost him. "Stay," Clara said. Ethan opened his eyes. He held Noah against his chest, not perfectly, but more securely than before. "I'm here," he whispered. "It's Dad. I know it has been a terrible day. I know people keep leaving rooms. I am not leaving this one," Noah cried into his shirt. Clara stood 3 feet away, hands folded. Margaret watched from the door, tears already slipping down her face. "Breathe slower," Clara said. Ethan did. His shoulders lowered. Noah's cries still came, but the spaces between them widened. "Now hum," Clara said. He hummed the lullaby. The first note was wrong. The second was worse. Clara's mouth twitched. Ethan heard the error himself and, for the first time since Olivia died, laughed in the nursery. It was small, broken, and astonished. Noah paused, offended or interested. "That was terrible," Clara said softly. "I know. Try again." He did. This time Clara sang under him, not over him. She let her voice become a rail beside his, something he could lean on without being carried. "Hush now, little heart. Mama's near." The dark will part. Ethan's voice cracked on Mama. He stopped. Margaret stepped forward. "Say her name," she whispered. Ethan looked at her. Margaret pressed both hands to her mouth, then forced them down. "I have been so afraid Noah would forget Olivia, that I punished the people helping him remember love. Say her name." Ethan looked at his son. "Your mother is Olivia," he said, voice breaking. "She wanted this chair. She wanted this song. She wanted me to stay when I was scared. She was right about almost everything." Noah's crying softened into hiccups. Clara felt the room change. Not because grief vanished. Grief never obeyed like that. The room changed because everyone stopped pretending the empty space could be filled by silence. Olivia was not being replaced. She was being spoken back into the life of her child. Ethan sat in the rocking chair with Noah against him. He hummed again. Clara added the words only when he lost the melody. Margaret sat on the floor beside the chair, too proud to ask permission, too broken to remain standing. The nurse wiped her eyes and quietly left. It took 47 minutes for Noah to fall asleep. Not 10, not 1, not the miracle people would later try to make it in retellings. 47 minutes of sweat, wrong notes, trembling arms, grief, patience, and staying. When Noah finally slept, he slept on his father's chest. Clara did not take him. That was the point. Ethan looked up at her, stunned and grateful. "He stayed with me." Clara smiled through tears. "No, you stayed with him." Those words became the beginning of the real healing. In the weeks that followed, the mansion changed by inches. The contact logs disappeared. The nursery door stayed open unless Noah was sleeping. The rotating staff became smaller, more consistent. Perfumes were banned from the nursery, not because an expert declared it, but because Ethan had learned his son knew the world through scent and rhythm. The sound machine was unplugged. Olivia's recorder stayed near the rocking chair. Ethan played it once each night, then told Noah one thing about his mother. At first, the stories were awkward. "She liked lavender. She thought my ties were boring. She bought this chair because I was being an idiot." Over time, they deepened. Ethan told Noah how Olivia danced barefoot in the kitchen, how she sent long voice messages instead of texts, how she had wanted a garden messy enough for bees. Margaret added stories too. She apologized to Clara one afternoon in the pantry, where apologies in rich houses rarely happened. "I was cruel," Margaret said. "I thought protecting Olivia meant keeping everyone away from her place. But Clara, you helped me see that love is not a chair someone steals. It is a light people carry forward." Clara accepted the apology without making Margaret comfortable too quickly. "Thank you for saying it." Margaret nodded, understanding that forgiveness was not a button pressed for the convenience of the guilty. Ethan offered Clara a permanent position as Noah's emotional care consultant, with a salary that made her sit down when she saw the number. Clara refused the first version. "This is too much," she said. "It is less than I paid the sleep specialist who did nothing." That is not the measurement. So they rewrote the role together. Clara would work part-time with Noah and help train caregivers in hospitals and homes connected to Ethan's foundation. She would not live in the mansion. She would not be on call every night. She would have boundaries written for her protection, not for her containment. Ethan also paid the agency penalty for Vivian's misconduct, and funded legal support for other domestic workers whose grief, poverty, or immigration status had been used against them. Clara insisted the fund not carry her name. Ethan insisted it carry someone's. In the end, they named it the Little Heart Fund. 6 months later, the Marlowe mansion opened its garden for the foundation's first gathering, not a gala. Clara refused the word, a gathering. Nurses, social workers, bereaved mothers, widowed fathers, hospital chaplains, and domestic workers stood beneath strings of soft lights, while children slept in strollers and volunteers served soup from the kitchen instead of champagne from silver trays. Ethan spoke briefly. He was still not a natural speaker when the subject was his heart. That made people listen more. After my wife died, he said, standing near the lavender Olivia had once planned to plant, I believed love meant providing everything, safety, care, expertise. But my son needed something I had been too frightened to give him, presence. A woman who had every reason to protect her own broken heart taught me that staying is also a form of love. My wife knew it before I did. My son taught it by needing it. Clara Hayes showed me how to begin. Clara stood near the back, uncomfortable with applause. She held Noah, now round-cheeked and heavy, only because Ethan had asked, and because Noah had reached for her after waking from a nap. The difference was that when Noah fussed, Ethan came without being called. Clara handed him over easily. Noah settled against his father. That simple transfer made Clara cry more than any speech. Later, after the guests left and the garden lights dimmed, Clara walked alone to the small bench near the lavender. Ethan found her there holding a folded paper, Caleb's photograph. May I sit? He asked. She nodded. For a while, they watched Noah sleep in a stroller near Margaret, who was telling him a story he could not possibly understand yet. I used to think, Clara said, that if Caleb's life meant something, I would know what it was. People kept telling me there was a reason, and I hated them for it. I still do, sometimes. I don't think children die so adults can learn lessons. Ethan's voice was quiet. No. But I think love can leave echoes, not reasons. Echoes. His song reached Olivia. Olivia carried it to Noah. Noah brought it back to me. That does not make the loss fair. It just means death did not get to keep everything. Ethan looked toward his son. No, it did not. Clara unfolded the photograph and touched Caleb's tiny face. Then she sang, very softly, the lullaby, all the way through for the first time since the hospital. She did not sing it as a plea. She did not sing it as a bargain. She sang it as a mother who had found a place where grief could breathe without swallowing every living thing. Hush now, little heart. Mama's near. The dark will part. If night is long and stars are few, love will stay awake with you. Across the garden, Noah stirred in his sleep but did not wake. Ethan bowed his head. Margaret closed her eyes. The house behind them, once enormous and helpless, glowed with a different kind of light. Clara kept singing until the last note faded into the lavender air. Caleb was still gone. Olivia was still gone. Nothing holy had been returned. Yet something had been carried forward. A song, a promise, a father who learned to stay, a child who learned the world could be safe, and a woman in a gray uniform who had been told she was only the help until the night her broken heart became the bridge that saved them all.